The theologians of the Imperium will tell you that chaos is an aberration, a corruption, something that crept into real space from the outer dark and latched onto humanity like a parasite. They are wrong. Khorne was not created by mankind's violence. He fed on it, grew vast and terrible from it. But the violence came first. It has always come first. Long before the first human raised a stone against another, sentient species across countless worlds were already doing the same. Killing for territory, killing for survival. Killing because the act of killing carved a groove in the mind that became, over time, a road, and then a need. Every one of those deaths sent a pulse into the immaterium, a tremor, a feeding. By the time the ancient civilizations of the galaxy were old enough to record their wars, the thing that would become Khorne was already coalescing in the Sea of Souls. Not yet a god, not yet a name, but a presence. A hunger shaped like a fist, clenching tighter with every slaughter committed under every star in the sky. Nothing summoned him. Nothing created him. He is what violence looks like from the inside. The nature of the Blood God. Most accounts that filter back through the Inquisition's censored archives describe Khorne in terms of what he wants. Blood, skulls, death. This framing misses almost everything important about him. Khorne is not a god of mindless slaughter. He is a god of conflict, of martial contest, of the primal testing of one mortal soul against another. He respects courage. He despises cowardice. A warrior who butchers unarmed prisoners in Khorne's name earns his contempt just as readily as a man who runs from battle. Khornate theology, such as it exists, is built around a single conviction. The only honest measure of a being is what it does when faced with destruction. He cares nothing for magic, nothing for plans, for plots, for carefully laid schemes. These are the currencies of Tzeentch, and Khorne's hatred for the Changer of Ways runs so deep it has shaped the warp itself. Where Tzeentch weaves and deceives, Khorne demands that conflicts be decided by blood and bone, the sword in the hand, the strike that connects. He is also the first, or very nearly so. The scholars who have studied the warp's archaeological strata consistently find Khorne's resonance signature beneath all others. He predates the fall of the Eldar. He fed from the war in heaven when the Old Ones and the Necrontyr were locked in a conflict that consumed entire civilizations and reshaped the galaxy's population of sentient species. And he was already vast by the time those civilizations destroyed each other. Some fragmentary sources suggest he predates written language entirely. Fed by the wars of species that no longer exist, civilizations that rose and killed each other down to the last bloodline before anyone thought to carve their names into stone. The other Chaos gods emerged from specific conditions. Slaanesh required the Eldar. Nurgle required despair at sufficient concentration. Tzeentch required hope weaponized against itself. Khorne required only one thing that has never once been absent from the galaxy since the first predator and the first prey met in the dark. The Skull Throne and the Brass Citadel. At the molten heart of Khorne's realm in the Warp sits the Brass Citadel, and at the Brass Citadel's center sits the Skull Throne. The throne is not a metaphor. It is a physical structure in the truest sense anything in the immaterium can be called physical. Millions of skulls, compressed and fused across eons of slaughter, form its mass. Champions of every species, generals of every war, warriors whose names were famous in civilizations that have since crumbled to nothing. They are all there. The skull of every being who was considered the greatest fighter of their age is eventually added to the throne's architecture. This is not decoration, it is a record. Khorne does not forget the names of those who earned their place on his throne. The Blood God knows every war ever fought in his name, and many fought without it. He knows which skulls belong to true warriors and which are counterfeit offerings from those who only killed the defenseless. The latter he finds offensive in a way that surprises those who assume he simply wants death in quantity. The Brass Citadel itself defies any architectural description drawn from mortal understanding. Its walls are the color of cooling metal and scaled in iron plates the size of battle tanks. The towers grind and shift against each other in patterns that mimic the mechanics of war. Siege, assault, retreat, counterattack. The sky above it boils a permanent blood red. shot through with black lightning that does not illuminate but seems to consume whatever light touches it. The number 8 runs through everything in Khorne's domain. The 8-pointed star of chaos, the symbol that now marks every warband pledged to the Ruinous Powers, carries Khorne's resonance more deeply than any other god's, a reflection of his precedence among the four, and of how long his influence has saturated the foundations of what chaos means. Rivers of blood flow through the realm rather than water. They accumulate, they never evaporate or drain. Fed from the constant slaughter that Khorne's realm perpetuates on itself in the hours between wars, they simply run, always and in all directions, pooling against the bases of the Brass Citadel's walls, and rising so slowly that the change is only visible across centuries. The Blood Legions and the realm beyond. Beyond the Citadel's walls, Khorne's realm extends across plains of dried blood and bone dust that stretch without horizon. The Blood Legions muster here between wars, demonic hosts organized by kill count and the quality of skulls taken, drilling in formations that mimic the armies of every species Khorne has ever observed at war. The sounds of that endless preparation, the clash of hellblades, the baying of flesh hounds, the grinding advance of juggernauts, carry across the immaterium for what would be hundreds of miles in real space terms. Khorne does not rule through administration. He rules through the presence of the throne, which every demon in his service can feel at all times, a constant weight of attention and judgment that does not require messengers or edicts. They know what he wants. They know what he rewards. The hierarchy enforces itself. The hierarchy of blood. The court of Khorne does not resemble the courts of other gods. There are no courtiers, no politics, no webs of favor and intrigue. Status in Khorne's hierarchy is determined entirely by prowess, and prowess is measured entirely by the quality of the skulls a being is taken and laid at the throne's base. Bloodthirsters. At the summit of Khorne's demon hierarchy stand the Bloodthirsters, the greater demons who serve as his generals and his wrath made manifest. They are massive beyond reason, creatures of muscle and brass and fury that dwarf space marine dreadnoughts, each one a living weapon that has been fighting since before most mortal civilizations existed. Bloodthirsters are not simply physical forces. They are strategic entities with centuries of battlefield experience distilled into instinct so refined it resembles genius. A Bloodthirster does not charge blindly. It reads a battlefield the way a master duelist reads an opponent's shoulders, and it hits where the line is about to break before the defenders know it themselves. They are divided into a loose hierarchy of their own. The wrath of Khorne Bloodthirsters are the most balanced, tactically capable, carrying both whip and axe, sent when a battle needs to be broken rather than simply destroyed. The Bloodthirsters of insensate rage are the opposite end of that scale, massive axe-wielding berserkers whose capacity for tactical thought has been burned away entirely, deployed when Khorne wants something annihilated rather than defeated. And the Bloodthirsters of unfettered fury are the hunters, faster and more agile than the others, dispatched against specific prey when Khorne wants a particular skull and wants it reliably taken. Skarbrand the Exiled. Once the greatest of all Bloodthirsters, Skarbrand carries a distinction no other demon in Khorne's service can claim. He attacked his own master. The accounts of how this happened vary considerably, and the most reliable versions suggest that Tzeentch engineered it, whispering manipulation so subtle that Skarbrand never recognized it as external. He believed he was acting on his own pride. He believed Khorne's power should be his. He raised his axes, slaughter and carnage, against the blood god himself. He failed, obviously. What is less obvious is that Khorne did not simply destroy him. Instead, the blood god picked up Skarbrand and threw him across the warp, not metaphorically, literally hurled him through the fabric of the immaterium with such force that every emotion was stripped from the greater daemon by the impact. Everything that had made Skarbrand an individual, his tactical mind, his pride, his specific and directed hatreds, was burned away in the transit. What landed on the far side of that throw was a Bloodthirster capable of nothing but undirected rage. Skarbrand cannot choose his targets or his timing. He simply attacks whatever is nearest with a savagery that exceeds even other Bloodthirsters, because there is nothing in him that is not rage anymore. Every part of his psychology that was not pure killing instinct was destroyed in that throw. He is terrifying not because he is powerful, though he is, but because he's entirely and permanently out of control. You cannot reason with him. You cannot distract him. He will kill until he is destroyed, and then he will return from the warp and begin again. Khorne exiled him rather than destroyed him. This itself is a statement. The blood god considered mindless, aimless slaughter a worse punishment than death. Kâbanda. Among the named Bloodthirsters, Kâbanda occupies a specific place in Imperial records because he has appeared in documented history multiple times and been identified across those appearances. His fixation on the Blood Angels runs deeper than battlefield opportunity. He returns to them specifically. He takes their skulls when he can. There is something personal in it, in the way anything personal can exist for a creature made of rage. His most notorious confrontation with the Sons of Sanguinius occurred at Cygnus Prime during the Horus Heresy, when the Blood Angels were lured into a trap by the forces of the Ruinous Powers, and Kâbanda descended on them with his full host. The demon tore through the 9th Legion's ranks and eventually came to blows with Sanguinius himself. Kâbanda left the Primarch badly wounded before Sanguinius drove him down and banished him. When Kâbanda fell, the psychic shockwave from the clash struck Blood Angels across the entire battlefield senseless. Many died. Those who survived were left with visions seared into their minds of Sanguinius's death, a death that had not yet happened, a death they could not explain. Kâbanda did not stay banished. Khornate demonic forces tore through the 9th Legion again at the Siege of Terra, and the accounts that name Kâbanda among them are consistent with how he operates. He does not miss slaughters of this scale. He has appeared in engagements against the Blood Angels across the millennia since. The devastation of Baal drew him again, the campaign where the Blood Angels faced Hive Fleet Leviathan, which unfolded concurrent with the Great Rift tearing open across the galaxy. He came not to serve any specific tactical end, but because the Sons of Sanguinius were dying in enormous numbers and he wanted to be part of it. A Bloodthirster wounded a Primarch badly enough that the fight nearly went the wrong way. Sanguinius was engineered beyond any human limit the Emperor could conceive, and Kâbanda still reached him, still left marks that the Primarch carried forward. That is the scale of force a greater demon of Khorne can bring to bear. Skulltaker. Skulltaker holds a position unlike any other demon in Khorne's service. He is not a demon prince. He is a herald of Khorne, elevated well above the rank of standard bloodletter to a station just beneath the Bloodthirsters themselves, and yet he sits closer to Khorne's direct attention than almost any other being in the Blood God's court. His true name was stripped from him long ago, burned away in fire at Khorne's direct command when he was elevated to the role of the Blood God's personal champion. What remains is the title, Skulltaker. His function is singular. When Khorne wants a specific skull, the skull of a champion who has proven themselves worthy of the throne, he sends Skulltaker to retrieve it. No demon in Khorne's realm has collected more skulls than Skulltaker, and no demon has faced a wider variety of enemies. He has killed champions of every major species in the galaxy. He has killed Chaos Space Marines who led warbands in Khorne's own name, because the Blood God occasionally decides that a champion who once pleased him has become complacent. And there's no better way to correct that than to send his personal executioner. He has killed Eldar Phoenix Lords and Orc War Bosses and Space Marine Chapter Masters. He has been banished and returned and resumed his work without apparent interruption. He wears a cloak made from the hides of Bloodthirsters he has defeated. This is not a metaphor or a legend. The cloak is documented in multiple recovered sources. He killed other greater daemons of his own patron and wore them. Khorne approved. The Skulltaker carries a blade called the Slayer Sword, a weapon that burns with brass-colored fire and cuts through wards, psychic protections, and armor that would stop almost anything short of a siege weapon. It does not simply wound. Skulltaker does not take skulls from living enemies. He takes them from enemies he has killed, and the Slayer Sword ensures those deaths are absolute. Heralds and Lesser Demons. Below the Bloodthirsters, Khorne's demon armies are organized into hosts led by heralds. These are powerful demons elevated above the common ranks by their record of kills and the quality of the skulls they have collected. They carry titles rather than names. The Deathbringer, the Skullmaster, the Blood Reaper. Bloodletters form the bulk of any Khornate demonic force. They are larger than a human, standing head and shoulders above even a space marine, red-skinned and blade-armed, with hellblades that burn with the fire of Khorne's wrath. These weapons cut through armor that would stop almost any other weapon. Documented battlefield reports describe bloodletters shearing through space marine Terminator plate as if the ceramite weren't there. Fleshhounds run alongside the bloodletters, and ahead of them, Khorne's hunting animals, immune to psychic power and built for tracking. Once a fleshhound has the scent of a prey, the only ways it stops are death and the explicit command of Khorne himself. They have been known to pursue targets for centuries of real time, crossing the warp and emerging in real space to find quarry who believe themselves safe. Juggernauts are not demons in the traditional sense, but rather constructs of brass and infernal fire that carry Khornate cavalry across battlefields. They cannot be stopped by anything short of weapons capable of killing tanks. Riders mounted on juggernauts combine the killing power of a demon champion with the raw impact force of a vehicle. The skull cannon and blood throne represent Khorne's concession that sometimes range and fire support are necessary, though he considers artillery spiritually inferior to close combat and would rather not use it. The skull cannon fires skulls blessed in Khorne's name that explode with warp energy on impact. The blood throne is a mobile command platform for heralds who need to move through demonic hordes without being consumed by them. The paradox of Khorne. Khorne abhors sorcery. This is one of the most absolute and consistent facts recorded about him across every source that survives the censors. He will not use it. He will not sanction it. He punishes those who use it in his name. But Khorne feeds on all violence, including violence committed by psychers, including the deaths that sorcery causes. This is not a contradiction he has resolved. It is a contradiction he holds in permanent tension, and it is one of the primary drivers of his war against Tzeentch, who uses nothing but sorcery and manipulation, and whose very existence is an affront to everything Khorne believes combat should be. Every soul that Tzeentch takes through magical scheming is a soul Khorne considers stolen, not because he wants it particularly, but because the method of taking it is wrong. The enmity between Khorne and Tzeentch is the oldest war in the warp. It predates the other gods' emergence. The forces of blood and the forces of change have been tearing at each other since before there were human armies to reflect their conflict, and the war between them has shaped the nature of both. Khorne grew more contemptuous of subtlety, partly because Tzeentch embodies it. Tzeentch grew more evasive and labyrinthine, partly because direct confrontation with Khorne's forces ends badly. His relationship with Nurgle is cooler but less hostile. The death that Nurgle represents is at least honest. The body fails and the soul goes somewhere. Khorne may not love it, but he understands it. Slaanesh is more complicated. The chaos god of pleasure claims the souls of warriors lost in the ecstasy of combat, which Khorne considers a form of theft, and the two have warred over this boundary since Slaanesh's emergence. The sorcery paradox has a practical consequence in the mortal cults devoted to Khorne. Any warband pledged to the blood god that employs a psyker is in violation of his creed, but Khorne does not always punish this immediately. He watches. He waits. When the psyker eventually causes a defeat or turns against the warband or is consumed by the powers they invoked, Khorne receives that as confirmation of what he already knew. Magic is unreliable, and those who lean on it instead of steel are eventually undone by it. He is rarely wrong about this. The Mark, the Collar, and the Blood Tithe. Khorne does not simply accept the worship of mortals who fight in his name. He marks them, and the mark is not symbolic. The mark of Khorne brands itself onto those the blood god has accepted, a physical change in the bearer's flesh that carries his attention with it. Warriors bearing the mark are stronger and more enduring than they were before, their rage no longer simply an emotion but a resource, a fuel that feeds into the immaterium with every kill they make. The mark does not make a warrior less themselves. It makes them more of what they were already becoming. The anger that was always there, the violence that was always close to the surface, the contempt for those who would rather negotiate than fight, all of it is amplified and given direction. The Collar of Khorne is a separate gift, granted to champions and to fleshhounds alike. It is a ward against psychic power, a band of brass and sorcery-canceling energy that makes the wearer resistant to the spells and powers of enemy psychers. The philosophical consistency of this is exact. Khorne despises magic. He cannot stop his enemies from using it without destroying them, but he can ensure that his own servants are not killed by it. The collar makes the wearer a dead end for psychic energy. Spells break against it. Witchfire dissipates before reaching the flesh beneath. The Blood Tithe is the mechanism by which all of this accumulates towards something larger. Every kill made by Khorne's warriors feeds a growing reserve of power, a tally kept not in any mortal ledger but in the Immaterium itself. When the tithe reaches sufficient depth, it can be drawn on. Demonic reinforcements can be summoned without ritual, called directly from the warp by the sheer weight of blood already spilled. Fallen champions can be resurrected. Wounds that would kill a normal warrior become irrelevant. The Blood Tithe is why Khornate forces grow more dangerous as a battle goes on rather than less. Every skull taken, every throat cut in Khorne's name adds to the reserve, and a warband that has been fighting for an hour has fed the tithe enough that it fights the second hour with capabilities it did not have at the start. Valkia the Bloody. Valkia the Bloody occupies a singular position in the records of Khorne's mortal servants. She is not simply a champion, she is Khorne's gore bride, empowered to convey the souls of fallen warriors to his realm, carrying his spear into battle as his direct representative among mortal armies. She began as a mortal, a chieftain's daughter from a tribal culture who spent decades of raiding and war in Khorne's name before she was elevated. The act that drew Khorne's direct attention was the carrying of a Slaaneshi demon's head before the Skull Throne, a feat considered almost impossible for a mortal warrior. Khorne did not simply take the offering. He looked at her, in the way a god looks at someone, and found what was there to be acceptable. She died soon after. Her own warriors turned on her when she returned from the Brass Citadel changed. Inhuman, Khorne's transforming power still burning through whatever remained of the woman she had been, she killed them, all of them. And then she died from the wounds they had given her, and Khorne raised her again, demonic this time, permanently. Her spear is called Sleipnir. Her shield is the demon head, made from the skull of the same Slaaneshi demon whose head she had carried to the throne. She now serves as Khorne's emissary to mortal armies fighting in his name, descending from the warp above battlefields where his followers are being tested. When Valkia arrives above a battlefield, the warriors below stop calculating whether they are going to survive. That calculation simply leaves them. Warriors who are no longer afraid of dying are very hard to stop. Doombreed, the first champion. Before the Horus Heresy, before the Long War, before Angron and the World Eaters carved their names into the history of chaos, there was Doombreed. He was a mortal man. The oldest surviving fragments of Khornate lore suggest he lived in an age so early in human history that his world may not have been Terra, or may have been a Terra so different from the one the Imperium knows that the difference might as well make it a separate planet. He was a warlord of such comprehensive destruction that Khorne elevated him to demonhood before recorded history. What this means is that Doombreed has been a demon prince longer than the Imperium has existed, longer than the Space Marine legions, longer than the Emperor's Great Crusade. He has been killing in Khorne's name since before the institutions humans used to measure time were established. He is rarely encountered and rarely discussed because the Inquisition suppresses information about him aggressively. The theological problem Doombreed creates is a serious one. If Khorne was elevating mortal champions to demon princes before human civilization had achieved writing, then the blood god's reach into human history runs far deeper than the ecclesiarchy can comfortably explain. Doombreed has appeared in documented engagements throughout the Imperium's history, always at moments of maximum slaughter. Every engagement where he appears results in casualties measured in millions and battlefields scoured clean of survivors on every side. He is not invulnerable. He has been driven back. But driving back a demon prince of his age and power requires committing forces at a scale most theater commanders cannot spare, and the cost in lives is enormous regardless of the outcome. Angron and the World Eaters. No story in the history of the Horus Heresy more completely illustrates what Khorne does to a legion than the story of Angron and the World Eaters. Angron was not born to serve Khorne. He was not inclined toward chaos in any form before the heresy. He was inclined toward rage, which is a different thing. The rage came from the butcher's nails. the neural implants hammered into his skull by the slavers who had owned him on Nuceria, implants that prevented the brain from producing the neurochemicals associated with satisfaction, achievement, or peace. The nails made him incapable of feeling anything except when he was fighting. Combat was not a release for Angron. It was the only state in which he was not in constant neurological agony. The Emperor found him leading a slave rebellion on Nuceria. Rather than let the rebellion succeed, rather than wait for Angron to win his freedom, the Emperor extracted him from the battlefield and placed him at the head of the 12th Legion. The rebels died without him. They had been winning. They would have won. Angron knew this, and it ate at him in the years that followed, in the way things eat at someone who cannot process grief because the nails will not allow it. By the time Horus Lupercal raised his rebellion, Angron needed almost nothing to push him toward it. He had been furious at the Emperor since the day of his retrieval. The World Eaters had been furious at other legions for years, because the nails were spreading through the legion by then, hammered into the skulls of warriors who volunteered and warriors who did not. And the entire 12th Legion was becoming something that looked like a weapon but fought like a disaster. The turn toward Khorne was less a conversion than a recognition. Khorne looked at what the World Eaters were doing and found it acceptable. More than acceptable. He sent his demons to fight alongside them. He elevated their slaughter to sacrament. He gave their endless, ungovernable need to kill a framework that made it feel like purpose. Angron's ascension to Demon Primarch did not happen at Armageddon. It happened during the heresy itself, during the Shadow Crusade, when Lorgar brought the Wordbearers and World Eaters back to Nuceria, the world where Angron had been enslaved, the world the Emperor had pulled him from before his rebellion could succeed. The slaughter of Nuceria's population, carried out under Lorgar's direction, was the act that finally broke whatever remained of the boundary between what Angron was and what Khorne had been drawing him toward. The blood toll of that single world tipped the scales. Angron was elevated in the midst of it, his body destroyed and remade by Khorne's direct intervention, and he emerged from the transformation as something that could no longer be called human, or even transhuman in any meaningful sense. When he came to Armageddon in M32, he was already a Demon Primarch, already millennia removed from anything he had once been. The first war for Armageddon was not his origin, it was his return. He led a Khornate invasion of such scale that entire continents burned before the Grey Knights were committed to stop him. When Angron was finally banished, it took the sacrifice of an entire brotherhood of Grey Knights, roughly 100 warriors, to drive him back. He did not simply retreat. He was driven back by mass sacrifice, and he returned to the warp, not defeated but delayed. The Butcher's Nails and their legacy. The nails came from Angron. He brought them to the 12th Legion, and the Legion made them its own. After the heresy, after the Long War, the nails continued spreading through the remnants of the 12th Legion and through other warriors who sought Khorne's favor through voluntary mutilation. They are still in use in the 41st millennium. The World Eaters of the current era fight with the same neurological compulsion as their predecessors from 10,000 years ago, and the nails have continued to evolve in ways that suggest something other than simple implant decay. Some who have studied recovered nails believe they have become warp reactive, not simply blocking neurochemical satisfaction, but actively routing the energy of the blocked pathways into the immaterium, feeding Khorne directly with every moment of frustrated peace the bearer experiences. If this is accurate, then every World Eater alive is not simply a servant of the Blood God. They are a direct pipeline into him, feeding him constantly, awake and asleep, fighting or resting, a continuous offering made not from devotion but from neurology. Angron's return. The warp does not hold Demon Primarchs indefinitely. After the Great Rift tore the galaxy open and the Age of the Dark Imperium began, Angron crossed back into real space. He has been documented in multiple engagements since, moving through the Imperium Nihilus with a force of World Eaters and demonic allies behind him, leaving systems scoured of human life in his wake. The Imperium, fractured by the rift and fighting on hundreds of fronts simultaneously, has struggled to commit the resources required to drive him back for any sustained period. He has had 10,000 years in the warp to consolidate what he is. Whatever it took to banish him at Armageddon in M32 will not be sufficient now, and the Imperium does not have 100 Grey Knights to spend on every incursion he makes. Angron is not a problem that has been solved. He is a problem that was postponed, and the postponement has run out. Khârn the Betrayer. There is a name spoken with more frequency in the annals of the Long War than any other associated with Khorne. Not Angron, not Skulltaker, not Valkia. Khârn. He was Angron's equerry and one of the 12th Legion's most decorated captains, a fighter of such capability that even among a legion drowning in the butcher's nails he stood apart. He did not simply have the nails. He had mastered fighting through them. He understood the damage they were doing to him and to his brothers, and he kept fighting anyway, because fighting was the only thing the nails allowed him to do cleanly. The event that gave him his epithet did not happen during the heresy itself. It happened at Skalathrax in the Eye of Terror, in the immediate aftermath of Horus's death, when the traitor legions were fragmenting and retreating and turning on each other in the collapse of everything they had built. The World Eaters and the Emperor's children had been at each other's throats throughout the retreat, and at Skalathrax the conflict reached a point that neither side had planned for. The fighting had stalled as night fell. Skalathrax's nights are lethal, temperatures cold enough to kill even space marines caught in the open, and both sides had pulled back to shelter. Khârn looked at what was happening and decided it was unacceptable. He picked up a flamer and he set fire to the shelters. Both sides, World Eaters and Emperor's children alike. He drove them all back into the killing cold, and the battle resumed, and by the time it was over, the World Eaters had ceased to exist as a coherent legion. He had not lost control. He had not gone berserk in the way the nails sometimes forced on warriors who could not master them. He made a deliberate choice to destroy any chance of the battle ending in anything but total slaughter, including the slaughter of his own brothers. Khorne was so pleased that Khârn survived the night, carried through it by the blood god's direct favor, while warriors around him froze. In the 10,000 years since Skalathrax, Khârn has operated without a legion, moving from warband to warband, fighting in conflicts across the galaxy, leaving trails of dead that include warriors from every faction. He does not lead, he does not recruit. He simply arrives at wars and participates in them, and when they are over, he leaves for the next one. The Betrayer title is not a condemnation. Among the servants of the Blood God, it is a compliment. It means he cannot be predicted even by those who believe they know him. It means even those fighting alongside him are not safe. He carries Gorychild, one of the paired chain axes Angron wielded before his elevation to demonhood. The weapon has killed so much and for so long that it is saturated in Khorne's power. Each tooth of the chain is a Mika dragon fang, virtually indestructible. What Gorychild cuts, it cuts through. The 8 Sacred Acts. Khornate doctrine resists codification, and Khorne himself has no interest in scripture. But across centuries of recovered cult materials, interrogated followers, and demonic testimony obtained under duress, certain values recur so consistently that the Inquisition's xenographers have mapped them into a rough framework. The following is their reconstruction, an observer's attempt to name what Khorne's servants already know in their bones. The first is the taking of worthy skulls, not any skull. The skull of a defeated enemy who fought with genuine courage and skill. A coward's skull is an insult to the throne. A child's skull is an obscenity. This is why Khornate warriors sometimes appear to behave with something resembling honor in combat, respecting strong opponents in a way that seems inconsistent with their reputation for savagery. The second is the refusal of magic. No sorcery, no warp-born power deliberately invoked. The warrior wins by steel and blood alone or does not deserve to win. The third is the offering of blood. Not merely spilling it, but directing it consciously toward Khorne's name. This is the act that turns battlefield slaughter into something the blood god receives as worship rather than simply as ambient violence. The fourth is the embrace of death, meaning the warrior who fears their own death has already surrendered half their power to the enemy. Death in battle is not shameful, it is an outcome, and sometimes it is the correct outcome. And the warrior who cannot accept that their skull may one day be offered to the throne is compromised by the knowledge. The fifth is the proving of dominance through combat, not through status or wealth or politics. Rank in Khorne's service must be earned through demonstrated skill in killing and nothing else. The sixth is contempt for weakness, not cruelty to the weak, which Khorne considers beneath contempt, but a refusal to be weak oneself, and a refusal to allow weakness to be treated as a virtue. The seventh is the destruction of cowardice wherever it is found. The warrior who runs from a fight earns no mercy. The warrior who wins through ambush and treachery rather than honest combat has offended Khorne regardless of the outcome. The eighth is the acknowledgement of worthy enemies. When a foe fights well enough to earn the respect of a Khornate warrior, that respect should be expressed in combat by giving them the fullest measure of violence available. The worst thing you can do to a great fighter in Khorne's theology is hold back. The greatest tribute is to kill them with everything you have. Khorne's influence on galactic history. The specific moments where Khorne's direct intervention in galactic events can be identified, as opposed to the ambient influence he exerts through the simple fact of war existing, form a list that the Inquisition has never been able to close. The First War for Armageddon has already been discussed. The Siege of Terra saw Khornate demons fighting in numbers drawn by the power of the heresy itself, fed by the billions of deaths on Horus's advance through the galaxy and the final catastrophic concentration of slaughter on Terra's surface. The scale of demonic incursion at the siege has not been matched in documented Imperial history since. The Black Crusades represent the most organized expression of Khornate influence in the current era. Not all Black Crusades are primarily Khornate in nature, but Khorne's forces participate in most of them, and the World Eaters have been instrumental in several. The 12 Crusades before the 13th gave Khorne millennia of feeding. The 13th, Abaddon's final push that broke the Cadian Gate and tore the Great Rift across the galaxy, produced slaughter on a scale that may have permanently altered the ratio of power between the Chaos Gods. Some inquisitorial analysis suggests Khorne came out of the 13th Black Crusade stronger relative to the others than he had been going in. The Great Rift itself changed the calculus in ways that are still being understood, with the warp and real space grinding against each other along a scar that runs across the entire galaxy. The barrier that had previously limited how much demonic power could bleed through in any given location is gone. Khornate demonic incursions that once required significant ritual preparation now occur spontaneously in regions close to the rift. The Blood God's reach into the material universe is longer than it has been since the heresy, and it is still growing. What Khorne wants. The simplest answer, the one you get from a mini-Storm pamphlet or a basic Inquisition briefing, is that Khorne wants death. He wants blood. He wants skulls. All of this is true, and none of it captures the point. Khorne wants war to be the thing that decides questions. He wants the universe to resolve its conflicts through direct, honest, armed combat rather than through politics, magic, disease, or pleasure. He is, in a deeply disturbing way, the most legible of the Chaos Gods. You know what he is asking for. You know what he will reward. You know what he will punish. There is no hidden agenda, no second meaning, no elaborate trap nested inside what appears to be a straightforward offer. The trap is simpler than that. The trap is that once you start giving him what he wants, you do not stop. The skulls you take feel less like offerings and more like necessities. The peace between battles stops feeling like rest and starts feeling like deprivation. The nails, metaphorical or literal, dig deeper, and the part of you that existed before the war starts to seem like a stranger you once were, rather than a self you could return to. Khorne's most honest followers know this and accept it. They know what the service costs, and they have decided the cost is acceptable, or they have decided that the question of cost stopped mattering somewhere in the middle distance of their career, and the service is simply what they are now. What Khorne wants in the end is for every soul in the galaxy to face that same reckoning. He wants the universe to look at itself clearly and admit what it is underneath all the art and philosophy and civilization. A place where things kill each other, have always killed each other, and will be killing each other long after the stars go out. He may not be wrong about that. He is certainly not finished.